one of the most common questions that I receive is whether or not you should disclose that you have a disability to your employer. People with disabilities are not required to disclose their disabilities in an interview or in the workplace, but you are required to only if you wish to receive reasonable accommodations, of which, if you are a person with a disability, you are entitled to in the United States. Now, everybody's circumstances are a little bit different, but there are three main ideas that I believe a person with a disability should have addressed and prepared for before they disclose. The first is that you need to be intentional as to when you disclose that you have a disability. This means that you are assessing and monitoring your progress in the workplace on a daily or weekly basis, and you're taking note of the things that really could use some adjusting because of your disability. You do not want to disclose your disability when the difficulties have piled up really high and you're in trouble. But you also don't want to disclose your disability because you feel pressured to, or because you've unfairly or illegally been asked if you have a disability by your employer. So you want to really think about your progress as an employee and the tasks that you have to complete. And if you can do those tasks without requiring any accommodations, then you don't need to disclose at all. But if you do require accommodations, you want to have noted down ways that you could adjust your environment or the tools at your disposal to better complete your job tasks for your disability. So that's the first one. You want to be intentional with when you disclose. You also want to be intentional with who you disclose to. That means that you want to go to somebody who's best trained to handle a situation like this one. Typically, that's a human resources representative. They do receive training in accommodations in the workplace and people with disabilities, and they typically handle the situation with a little bit more understanding, excuse me, than maybe your direct supervisor. So go to your human resources representative when you are prepared to do so and make a meeting with them to discuss your disability privately and confidentially. And then from there, you can work with that individual to implement strategies for you in your workplace. If you're working in a smaller environment, maybe you don't have a human resources department. Maybe you do have to speak to your supervisor. And whether you're speaking with the human resources department or your supervisor, the next third prong that you should focus on is vitally important, especially if you don't have a human resources department. You want to be intentional as to what you disclose in the workplace about your disability. This means that you are not going into too many details that don't need to be shared, too many private, personal, medical issues that you may have faced, surgeries that you've received, treatments that you've gotten, doctors who you've worked with. Really, what you need to do is ask your employer, what information do you need from me to document my disability so that I can receive reasonable accommodations and do an exceptional job here to contribute to my work environment. All they should really need is perhaps a letter from your doctor or your medical team, about your needs in the workplace. You do not need to over-describe your disability to anybody. And often I have found that employers mishandle cases with persons with disabilities when that person with a disability felt compelled, like they had to overshare the many details and struggles that they've had with their disability. So I typically, even in environments where, maybe it's a work environment where you work specifically with people with disabilities, even where you feel like they will be the most understanding, you still want to be selective with the information that you share, because your privacy is something that you are entitled to, and it's something that should be fostered and protected. It is not, you don't need to justify that you have a disability above and beyond. You just need to provide the documentation so that you can use the tools and techniques and strategies that best enable you to be a success at work. So do not provide, lab results or, medication lists or anything to your employer. First, go to your employer and ask, what do you need from me? Then go to your doctor and say, this is what I need. And then you submit that. So it's really a matter of putting the effort into practicing talking about your disability and sharing your private personal information in a manner which most protects you and your longevity at the company, but also protects you from unfair stigma. If you have any questions about special challenges that your work environment requires of you, or maybe you are dealing with an especially difficult boss, feel free to reach out to me and I'll see if I can provide some insight as to ways that you can best handle the situation. Thanks.